manufacturing industry, agriculture, transportation, energy, and clean hydrogen sectors. Nebraska is a prime candidate for a hydrogen hub location. We already meet some of the more important grant criteria by having a diverse mix of electric generation and existing substantial infrastructure capable of transporting hydrogen across the United States. Monolith, a clean hydrogen manufacturer, is already established in Nebraska. They are currently producing clean hydrogen and are seeking to expand. This bill provides an opportunity for Nebraska to secure significant funding, approximately $2 billion, to bring substantial economic growth and job opportunities to Nebraska. There was no opposition to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address amendment at this time if possible.
Please proceed to the committee amendment, Senator Bosselman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AM 1895 makes a few technical changes to the bill by having the governor appoint the working group, removes the operative date, and removes the general fund appropriation. There is no fiscal note. This bill, as amended, advanced from committee 8-0 with no opposition. I ask for a green vote on LB 1099 and its advancement to select file. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman. Debate is now open on the committee amendment. Senator Brandt, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here to sing the praises of Monolith. Monolith is in the 32nd district, and I've got some bullet points here I'd like to read to the body about what this is. Monolith is the largest producer of green carbon black. And what carbon black is, if you look at Senator John Kavanaugh's desk, that is carbon black around that coffee container. Your tires are black because of carbon black. Historically, carbon black is a tremendously dirty industry. It's made from oil. This industry, this group has figured out how to make clean carbon black. Monolith is the largest user of electricity in the state, and they are going to grow by a factor of 20. So let me tell you a few things about Monolith. And also in your emails today, you'll get an opportunity to tour Monolith if you so choose. So keep an eye out for that later this month. Monolith's flagship location, known as Olive Creek 1, is located in Hallam, Nebraska. It was completed in 2020. It's successfully running and selling product to customers today. Company headquarters is right here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Since breaking ground in 2016, Monolith moved over 50 team members and their families from San Francisco to Nebraska. Olive Creek 1 is a $100+ million capital investment responsible for creating over 90 direct jobs and 108 indirect jobs and generating over 46 million annual economic impact. The jobs created by Monolith are highly paid, highly skilled, clean energy jobs located in Nebraska. What's there today is the research plant. Now we're going to build a plant called Olive Creek 2 that is 20 times bigger. So OC2, due to the growing demand for clean hydrogen production, just after completing construction of the first facility in 2020, the expansion plans began, and that'll be known as Olive Creek 2. That's going to start construction at the end of this year. The Olive Creek 2 expansion project increases clean hydrogen production to nearly 60,000 tons annually in Nebraska, and they will convert that clean hydrogen to carbon-free anhydrous ammonia, enabling the production of 275,000 tons of clean ammonia coming from Hallam, Nebraska. That's sort of a jump. How did we go from clean hydrogen to ammonia? Initially, when that plant was built, the hydrogen was supposed to be burned in the adjacent Sheldon coal burning facility. That did not work out. And so now they are going to construct an anhydrous ammonia plant. Once the facility for OC2 is complete and the anhydrous facility, it will be over a $1 billion capital investment. It will create 200 jobs. Currently, a lot of anhydrous is imported into Nebraska. This anhydrous plant, by producing 275,000 tons, will cut into the 2 million tons that are currently imported from Russia and the Ukraine. And for those of you that don't farm, last year we paid $400 a ton for anhydrous. Today in Plymouth, Nebraska, it's $1,500 a ton. It's gone up by 350%. It's just one of the many things that's happening in agriculture today. So I would urge your green vote on 1099 and the amendment, and for the positive future economic growth for the state of Nebraska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Bosman, you recognize the close. Senator Bosman waives closing. Question before the body is the adoption of the committee amendments. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendments.
Committee amendments are adopted. Turning to debate on the bill. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Bosman, you recognize the close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that vote, folks, and for confidence in this. This provides a significant opportunity for the state, both in clean hydrogen, clean energy, and I encourage you to continue to vote green on LB 1099. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bosman. The question before the body is the advancement of LB 1099 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
43 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
LB 1099 is advanced. Next bill.
Next bill, Mr. President, Legislative Bill 964, introduced by Senator Bostar, is bill for an act relating to Nebraska State Patrol, provides for reimbursement for per diem expenses and for actual meal expenses as prescribed, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 11th of this year and referred to the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments.
Senator Bostar, you recognized open on LB 964.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. LB 964 is a bill to provide members of the Nebraska State Patrol with 100% of the federal per diem rate while on travel duty, except when a Nebraska State trooper is serving on a detail in executive protection. In that situation, the trooper shall be reimbursed in full for actual meal expenses if the expenses exceed 100% of the established per diem rate. In 2020, the legislature passed LB 381, which modified the rate of reimbursement for meal expenses for any state officer, employee, or member of any commission, council, committee, or board of the state. Rather than paying actual expenses, the bill stated that going forward, reimbursement would be provided at between 60% and 100% of the Federal General Services Administration's per diem model, as determined by in accordance with policies established by the State Director of Administrative Services. At the hearing for LB 964, a DAS representative indicated that LB 381 had tasked them with finding an overall cost-neutral per diem rate for all state employees, regardless of department. Ultimately, they calculated that 70% of the federal per diem rate was the cost-neutral average for all employees. They acknowledged that this was just an average, which may not have represented actual costs and needs for every agency and department. The very nature of the job of a member of the Nebraska State Patrol is that in the course of their duties, they are forced to eat many meals on the go and are not always able to bring their meals with them in the field. While this change brought about by LB 381 may have made sense as applied to many of our boards and state employees and brought some efficiencies to the Department of Administrative Services, it treats members of our state patrol unfairly. Troopers can be sent on travel duty for sometimes weeks or even months at a time and may be called to work in unusual environments, such as from a helicopter on a training exercise or deployed to another state in accordance with an Emergency Management Assistance Compact. Inherently, these long deployments and unusual circumstances mean that they are forced to eat meals out more often and with less choice than they would have serving in their home communities. LB 964 makes it clear that members of the Nebraska State Patrol should be compensated at 100% of the federal per diem rate of the state that they are traveling within. The bill also provides for a different per diem treatment for state troopers who are serving in the executive protection detail. Troopers serving on a detail in executive protection are required to work hours and in locations that provide even less flexibility than usual for finding a time and place to eat an economical meal. Under current law, these troopers are treated the same as every other state employee, despite having significantly less choice and control over where they may be able to eat meals. Under LB 964, these troopers on the executive protection detail would be fully reimbursed if the cost of the meals exceeds the per diem rate set by DAS. Since the introduction of this legislation, those members serving in the executive protection detail have been issued charge cards to cover their meal expenses. I applaud this administrative decision, but as this is merely a choice being made by the current administration, the changes in legislation are still necessary to ensure a more permanent resolution. LB 964 has no fiscal impact to the state, and all costs associated with the implementation and execution of this legislation will be absorbed by the responsible departments or agencies. And I would encourage you to support the Nebraska State Patrol and advance LB 964, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your opening, Senator Bostar. Debate is now open on LB 964. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Bostar, you recognize the close. Senator Bostar waives closing. Question for the body is the advancement of LB 964 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
38 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
LB 964 is advanced. Senator Hunt would like to welcome around 200 total students with the Nebraska State Thespian Society from all across the state of Nebraska. They're here with 10 teachers, and they are in the north balcony. Would you please rise and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature? Turning to the next bill on the agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 804, introduced by Senator Hughes, is a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Power Review Board, changes the compensation for certain board members as prescribed in repeals original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 6th of this year and referred to the Natural Resources Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Hughes, you recognize to open on LB 804.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. First off, I'd like to thank the Speaker for designating 804 as one of his Speaker priorities. LB 804 seeks to increase the amount of maximum allowable days the member of the Nebraska Power Review Board designated to represent Nebraska on the Southwest Power Pools Regional State Committee can engage in activities on behalf of the state of Nebraska. To do so, the maximum per diem compensation established in Nebraska Statute 70-1003 must be increased. The Regional State Committee of the SPP, Southwest Power Pool, is composed of public utility commissioners from states within the Southwest Power Pool's operating area that have one or more utilities that are members of the Southwest Power Pool. In 2016, the statutory maximum per diem compensation for the Power Review Board member who represents Nebraska on the Regional State Committee, was set at $20,000, which equates to 80 per diem days or $250 per day. The activities of the Southwest Power Pool and the Regional State Committee has steadily increased since 2016. And in 2021, the member of the Power Review Board representing Nebraska used all available per diems and had to limit his meetings and other activities on behalf of the state of Nebraska. This was caused due to the polar vortex we all experienced a year ago. LB 804 would increase the maximum allowable per diem from 80 days to 140 days by increasing the maximum per diem compensation from $20,000 to $35,000. It is still the $250 per day. It's just giving them more days
when they are traveling to be compensated. The total aggregate compensation allowed for the designated member and proxies acting on his or her behalf would likewise be increased by the same amount from $25,000 to $40,000. The Power Review Board is funded by an assessment on the generating facilities in the state of Nebraska. So this is coming out of their own budget. I would certainly encourage a green vote on LB 804. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Debate is now open on LB 804. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to stand and acknowledge all of the students we have with us today in their house, in the People's House here in our state capitol. I'm from Thespian Troop 3142 in Blair, Nebraska, and theater was such an important part to me when I was growing up, when I was a queer kid in a small town. You know, that's where I really found support, and it's where I found friendship, and not just from theater kids, but it was really a group of people that pulled folks from all different parts of the school, and we loved working on our plays and everything. And I want Nebraskans to know that there are 44 active thespian troops in Nebraska, and these are groups of drama clubs and things like that in schools throughout our state. And there are over 600 inducted thespians in Nebraska. And to become part of the International Thespian Society, you actually have to do a lot of work. You have to spend hours working on plays, and that's not just learning lines and working on costuming and acting. It's things like set design. It's things like construction skills. It's things like working on the team and making sure that everybody is in the right place at the right time. So there's a lot of different leadership and management skills that you learn in drama club and as a thespian. And theater is so good for kids. It teaches them so many life skills. It brings people together around the arts and around culture. And it's so important that we continue to enrich the arts in Nebraska, that we make sure that people in our schools are having the opportunities to learn about our history as a people through the arts, through drama, through acting, through literature, which is a huge part of that. And I just want to welcome all these students and tell them this is your house. You are always welcome here, and we're here to serve you. And you should be so proud of everything that you're doing as supporters of the arts, as actors, as thespians here in Nebraska. And I know that you're all doing everything you can to act well your part, because therein all the honor lies. Thanks, guys. I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Mosier, you're recognized. Senator Mosier on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When this came up for vote from committee, I voted no. And after doing more research, I was thinking that the members of the Power Review Board were in the industry of power generation, and they were already compensated by the companies that they worked for. But after looking into it a little bit further, the members of the Power Review Board are regular citizens. They may be attorneys, CPAs, business people, but they're not employed in the power industry. So that makes the per diem more important, because their employer may or may not keep their salary, allow them to collect their salary while they're representing us on the Power Review Board meetings. So I'm going to change and support this. And I just wanted to mention, in case anybody was wondering why I voted no, I was incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator Matt Hansen, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I couldn't let the opportunity pass. Senator Hunt flagged my attention to it with all the ITS kids up there. And as a founding member of ITS Troop 6547 here in Lincoln, I'm excited to see the future leaders of our state being engaged both in the arts and politics, and wanted to welcome them to the chamber as well. I was a tech kid all the way through and now do public speaking as a career, which is not something I would have probably gotten into or expected had I not been so involved in high school. So welcome to the Capitol. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hughes recognized to close. Senator Hughes waives closing. Question before the body is the advancement of LB 804 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
41 nays, no nays on advancement of the bill.
LB 804 is advanced. Next bill.
Next bill, Mr. President, Legislative Bill 887, introduced by Senator Slama, is a bill for an act relating to state colleges. Change provisions relating to expenses and officers for the Board of Trustees of Nebraska State Colleges, updates terminology, eliminates references to sections not applicable to state colleges, change provisions relating to meetings, eliminates a fee, change provisions relating to conference of degrees, changes provisions relating to authorization for master's programs, eliminates duties, eliminates provisions relating to morals and prohibiting religious tests, harmonized provisions, repeals the original sections, outright repeals several sections. Bill was read for the first time on January 7th this year and referred to the Education Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Salama, you're recognized to open on LB 887.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. LB 887 is a cleanup bill constructed in conjunction with Chancellor Turman, the State College Board of Trustees, and constituents in my own district, home of Peru State College. LB 887 proposes minor changes to 11 statutes that influence Nebraska State Colleges. The specific changes include the removal of references to the reimbursement for mileage and travel expenditures for the Board of Trustees in 85302, which conflicts with current constitutional language establishing the members thereof shall receive no compensation for the performance of their duties, but may be reimbursed their actual expenses incurred therein. Proposed revisions to 85302, 85304, 85306, and 85308 seek to eliminate outdated language, clarify the role and function of specific officers, affirm that state college is intended when school is used throughout the respective statutes, and clarify the role of specific officers. 85305 has now been revised to allow a calendar structure to better align with the approval processes necessary throughout the fiscal year rather than the academic calendar. 85307 currently requires the Board of Trustees to collect a matriculation fee from all students, which is an outdated and unnecessary charge to students. The removal of this specific fee allows the Board of Trustees to set fees necessary for the effective management of the colleges without excessive specificity. 8530801 currently provides that faculty serve a role in conferring graduates after students have successfully completed their degree requirements as approved by the Board of Trustees. In practice, the faculty establish the academic requirements for each degree program rather than the recommended statutes for students, recommended students for graduation directly to the board. LB 887 deletes the statement that conferring of a degree is dependent on, quote, the recommendation of the faculty of their respective college, as it does not reflect current practice and is unnecessary. Finally, the revisions to 85957 seek to create alignment for programmatic authorization processes at Peru State College with Chadron and Wayne State Colleges and the University of Nebraska-Kearney. When the academic missions for each of these three institutions were approved in the 1990s, updates were not made to Peru State College. Then in 2006, revisions were made restricting Peru State College's authority, which should ultimately be a function of the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education. In short, Peru State College is the only state college or university in the state that must go through the legislature for direct authorization for master's degree programs. Everything else is handled by the CCPE. So this bill cleans up that language and allows more students in Southeast Nebraska to have access to advanced degrees. Peru State is currently at a disadvantage since they can only offer 2 graduate degree programs. It is only fair to give them the same authority as our other great state colleges. LB 887 is supported by the Coordinating Commission for Post-Secondary Education and the Nebraska State College System. I'd like to thank the speaker for giving this cleanup bill a priority. It was advanced out of the Education Committee unanimously, and I would ask for your green vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Debate is now open on LB 887. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Slama, you're recognized to close. Senator Slama waives closing. Members, the question is, shall LB 887 be advanced? All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish? Record, Mr. Clerk.
37 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
LB 887 is advanced. Moving back to the agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, next bill, Legislative Bill 698, introduced by Senator Coulterman. It's a bill for an act relating to the Medical Assistance Act. Provides requirements regarding coverage and repeals the original section. The bill is read for the first time on January 5th of this year and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Coulterman, you're recognized to open on LB 698.
Thank you, Senator Williams. Good morning, colleagues. This morning, I'm here to ask for your support of Legislative Bill 698, a proposal directing Nebraska Medicaid to cover diabetes patient access to continuous glucose monitors, commonly referred to as CGMs. I want to start by thanking Speaker Hildress for making LB 698 a priority bill. And I want to thank the senators who serve on the Health and Human Services Committee for voting this bill out of committee unanimously. As you may know, CGMs allow individuals with diabetes to track their glucose levels at regular intervals, generating readings every 5 minutes to help patients with diabetes more accurately dose insulin. The American Diabetes Association has stated that CGMs are recognized as a standard of medical care for effective diabetes treatment for those patients on insulin therapy. All commercial insurance plans, Medicare, and over 45 state Medicaid programs provide coverage for CGMs. While 1 out of 3 of the MCOs in Nebraska does provide coverage for CGMs in Nebraska, we are just one of 5 states where Medicaid program itself does not require any type of coverage for CGMs. Numerous studies have shown that patients who manage their diabetes have better outcomes, a higher quality of life, and cost significantly less to the state. Without proper care, diabetes patients are at increased risk of blindness, limb amputation, kidney failure, and heart disease. Real-time CGM systems have been proven to improve glucose control throughout reductions in A1C and time spent in hypoglycemia, which is when an individual's blood sugar is too low. The alerts provided from real-time CGM systems help prevent hypoglycemia, especially when these individuals are sleeping because their blood sugar is trending too low. An alert will sound to wake the person up so they can treat it. As was explained during the Health and Human Services Committee hearing, these devices are extremely important because not only do they save money with reduced hospitalizations, they also save lives. The committee heard from multiple individuals who either have diabetes or provide care for those who do. These devices can send alerts to multiple people at once, whether it is a parent, a school nurse, or a babysitter, if blood sugars are getting too low or too high at all times of the day. The committee heard from a mother whose child was starting to suffer from hypoglycemia in the middle of the night. The CGM recognized that blood sugars were dropping quickly, and the device sent an alert to her phone in the middle of the night, waking her up so she could respond to the situation. The CGM saved the child's life that night. With everything as technology improves, the cost of CGMs decreases with an average system generally costing around $1,300 a year. Since these systems replace the need for traditional finger sticks, incremental cost per patient who elects to make the change is only about $88 a year, but the cost savings are tremendous. Numerous published studies correlate CGM use to reduce hospitalization with an average of $3,800 for each avoided hypoglycemia hospitalization and $8,500 for each avoided hospitalization for diabetic ketoacidosis, a potentially fatal condition resulting from a patient's extremely high blood sugar levels. Once again, I thank Speaker Hildreth for making LB 698 a speaker priority. There was no opposition to this legislation at the Health and Human Services Committee hearing, and there were no letters in opposition. Thank you for your consideration. I ask for a green vote on LB 698 as we work to protect Nebraskans with diabetes and to ensure that all Nebraskans with diabetes have access to life-saving technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Colterman. Debate is now open on LB 698. Senator Arch, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of LB 698, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the fiscal note. First of all, as Senator Colterman said, we received no opposition testimony, no opposition letters. We did receive a number of proponents: Nebraska Medical Association, Hospital Association, Nurses Association, the American Association of Endocrinology, Nebraska Academy of Family Physicians, all as proponents. But to the fiscal note, so I want to just kind of reinforce what Senator Colterman said. First of all, it was pointed out to us that glucose monitoring is already going on with the finger prick and then the test strips. And so with that replacement of that cost, as Senator Colterman said, $88, $90 a year approximately additional for the continuous glucose monitoring versus the traditional of the finger stick and the strips. That is not factored into this fiscal note at all. No recognition of the reduction or elimination of those costs. The other factor in this fiscal note is this is only done with a physician order. You don't go out and just get continuous glucose monitoring. So a physician orders it, and it depends upon what you're experiencing, whether that can be a benefit to you. Right now, the fiscal note assumes that 100% of type 1 diabetics will receive continuous glucose monitoring. We questioned some of the physicians that were in front of us. Is that the case? They said no. They said no, it will not be 100% of type 1. It depends upon what that patient is experiencing. The other thing that is not factored into that, of course, is, and this is difficult to factor in, but when you are not monitoring your blood sugar, you can have some of these incidents, and some can be very severe with going into seizures and unconscious and very difficult. Hospitalization occurs, emergency room visits occur. None of that was factored in a reduction of costs, only the glucose monitoring itself. And I want to read a quote in the fiscal note to you. Use of CGMs do appear to result in healthcare cost savings when use is targeted to certain patient groups and decreased hospitalizations are factored in. Additional information is needed to determine the net savings that may be gained from targeted CGM usage. So there is a recognition that there are reductions in costs. They did not calculate net savings. So there will be a revised fiscal note, obviously, once this bill passes the general file, and I hope that there can be some consideration of that. The other piece of this is that one of our MCOs already include this for their patients. So take out a third of the population now, and so now we're talking about 2/3. So while certainly they made an attempt on this fiscal note with the information that they had, I'm anticipating that we'll see a different fiscal note after this passes on general file. The last piece I would mention is the other testimony. Like all technology, the costs of continuous glucose monitoring, the technology itself, is declining. And so with that, we saw that fiscal note very clearly, but the testimony was compelling, and I believe that they need to go back and take another look at the fiscal note and see what that net savings would be, recognizing some of these other factors. With that, I am in strong support of LB 698. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Arch. Senator McCollister, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. As a diabetic of 33 years, I can tell you for a fact these monitors really do work. In fact, 2 months ago, I wore one of those monitors for 30 days, and it's a fascinating thing how these monitors work. They work with a Bluetooth device onto your telephone, so at any time of the day or night, you can actually take your blood sugar. It also has alarms on it, so if your blood sugar goes too low or too high, you get an alarm. And what an amazing tool that would be for parents with a kid, particularly for a type 1 diabetic. So I heartily endorse this bill 698. I would encourage you to use your green button for this bill.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. Senator Hilkeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise also in support of LB 698, and I thank Speaker Hilgers for making this a speaker priority. As a podiatrist and who worked with thousands of diabetics in my practice time, there is nothing more important than keeping good monitoring of your blood glucose levels. And this glucose monitoring is a very important tool for the management of diabetics. When it comes to the physical note, I don't think there's any way that they could come up with a true physical note, because we have no idea how many millions of dollars that this saves if you can keep a diabetic under control. The cost of an ulcer care, of amputation, of all the different things that can be involved if in patients who do not have their blood sugars under control, it could go on. And any infectious process with the cost of IV antibiotics that we have today, these are can be into the thousands of dollars for therapy, even on a daily basis. So 698 is wonderful legislation. Thank you for bringing it, Senator Coleman, and thank you, Senator Hilgers, for prioritizing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hilkeman. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Coulterman, you're recognized to close on LB 698.
Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate the support that has been expressed for this bill. Ketoacidosis and hypoglycemia are huge expenses if you end up in a hospital. So the savings just from not ending up in the hospital should more than offset the cost of these apparatus. The other thing, if you've ever seen a diabetic that's losing their eyesight or had to have an amputation, those are expensive items as well. I would encourage you to support this bill. It's my understanding that the Department of Health and Human Services is looking at including this next time in their request for proposal, but at this time it's not there, and I'd like to get this approved. So thank you very much, and I hope you vote green.
Thank you, Senator Coulterman. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 698 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
45 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
LB 698 advances. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 820, introduced by Senator Matt Hansen, is a bill for an act relating to municipalities, change the population threshold for cities of the metropolitan class and cities of the primary class, harmonize provisions, and repeal the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 6th of this year and referred to the Urban Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Matt Hansen, you're recognized to open on LB 820.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I'm rising to introduce LB 820, which changes the population threshold distinguishing between cities of the metropolitan class and cities of the primary class from 300,000 to 400,000. Nebraska municipalities are broken down into different categories based upon population: metropolitan class, primary class, first and second class cities, and villages. Currently, the city of Lincoln is the only primary class city in Nebraska, and they are quickly approaching the 300,000 person threshold, separating them from the metropolitan class city category. Lincoln had a census population of 291,082 people in the 2022 census. If they were to cross over the 300,000 threshold before we changed it, we would have no cities of the primary class in Nebraska, and Lincoln would be subject to a multitude of different statutes that only impact metropolitan class cities. This would create a number of issues which were raised at the hearing on the bill, including continuity of operations challenges, changes to the city council, creating a separate transit authority, and the overall expense of changing from a primary class to a metropolitan class. To avoid this issue, LB 820 would raise the floor of metropolitan class cities from cities with a population of over 300,000 to populations with cities over 400,000, meaning the population threshold for cities of the primary class would be changed from those between 100,000 and 400,000. LB 820 was brought to me by the City of Lincoln and supported at the hearing by Lincoln, Omaha, the League of Nebraska Municipalities, and the Lincoln Independent Business Association. LB 820 had no opponents, no fiscal note, and was advanced from the Urban Affairs Committee vote by a vote of 7-0. Would like to thank Speaker Hilgers for making this a speaker priority and would appreciate your green vote in LB 820.
Thank you, Senator Matt Hansen. Debate is now open on LB 820. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Hansen waives closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 820 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 820 advances. Members, we're going to pass over LB 436 for the time being. We'll come back to that later and go now to LB 840, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 840, introduced by Senator Brewer, is a bill for an act relating to legal notices, changes provisions relating to publication and rights, repeals the original section. The bill is read for the first time on January 6th of this year and referred to the General Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments.
Senator Brewer, you're recognized to open on LB 840.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. LB 840 is a bill brought to me on behalf of the Nebraska Press Association. It was voted out of General Affairs Committee unanimously 8-0 with no opposition. This is a speaker priority bill. Starting on October 1st, 2022, the bill would require all newspapers accepting legal notices to post such notices to a statewide website established and maintained by a majority of newspapers in the state. The website is not maintained at taxpayer expense. Publishing a notice to the website would be in addition to the print publication of the public notice, which remains the official notice. This bill would adjust the maximum price newspapers are allowed to charge for providing it as legal advertising. LB 840 changes the price from 45 cents per line of text to 48 cents. This increase will be phased in over 2 years. These price ceilings were last changed in 1995 and would be adjusted to account for inflation. So it's been 36 years without a change. I urge you to vote green on LB 840 and the committee amendment AM 1915. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Members, Senator Flood would like to recognize 19 high school students and 2 teachers from Madison High School in Madison, Nebraska, seated in the north balcony. Would you please rise and be recognized by your Nebraska legislature? As the clerk stated, there are amendments from the General Affairs Committee. Senator Lowe, you're recognized to open on the committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 1915 is a short amendment that adds clarifying language to ensure that the posting to the website or failure to make the posting to the website does not affect the legal validity of the notice that was published correctly in the newspaper. The amendment was adopted and the bill was voted out of committee to general file unanimously. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lowe. Debate is now open on AM 1915. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Lowe, you're recognized to close on the committee amendment. Senator Lowe waives closing. Members, the question is, shall the committee amendments to LB 840 be adopted? All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
38 ayes, no nays on adoption of the committee amendments.
The amendment is adopted. Returning to debate on LB 840. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Brewer, you're recognized to close. Senator Brewer waives closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 840 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
The bill advances. Returning to the agenda.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 888, introduced by Senator Day, is a bill for enacting education, redefines the term and repeals the original section. The bill was read for the first time on January 7th this year and referred to the Education Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with no committee amendments. There are additional amendments, pending, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Day, you're recognized to open on LB 888.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. This morning, I am introducing LB 888, which is a bill that would add a requirement that Nebraska schools would add the Holocaust to their social studies curriculum. This idea was first brought to the legislature in 2020 by Senator Sarah Howard in LB 640, which had a number of co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle but stalled in committee. Since the introduction of LB 640 in 2020, the need for this legislation has grown only further. I'm thankful to Speaker Hilgers for designating it as a speaker priority. Alarmingly, as we become further removed from World War II, knowledge among youth of the Holocaust is declining. In a 2020 survey of millennials and Gen Z, 63% of respondents did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and over half of those thought the death toll was fewer than 2 million. In a different 2018 survey, 66% of millennials were unable to identify what Auschwitz was. What is particularly shocking and disappointing about this decline in knowledge of the Holocaust is that it is a relatively recent event that happened only 77 years ago. Unfortunately, unless we work to ensure that this event is taught only a few generations removed from the Holocaust, ignorance will only increase as it falls further into history. Currently, Nebraska only has 9 remaining living survivors of the Holocaust. Unfortunately, we are losing the most human connection we have with the victims, the ones who have asked us never to forget this atrocity. The remaining survivors have made themselves clear and have urged the world not to forget what happened. The same anti-Semitism that has been one of the oldest pathologies of hate in the world still disturbingly exists today. In the 2021 American Jewish Council survey of American Jews, 1 in 4 American Jews have reported being the target of anti-Semitism within the past year, and 4 in 10 have changed their behavior within the past year out of fear over anti-Semitism. According to FBI statistics, nearly 60% of all religiously motivated hate crimes are directed at Jews, who make up 2% of the US population. The increase in anti-Semitism, combined with our youth's fleeting knowledge of the Holocaust, paints a troubling picture and underscores the need to ensure that Nebraska students are aware of the consequences of unchecked hate and ignorance. And unfortunately, we heard during our hearing from those who have experienced shocking anti-Semitism firsthand. LB 888 is about making sure students are aware when we allow ourselves to lose focus of our shared humanity and slip into hate. Currently, 23 states have a requirement that Holocaust education be taught in schools, the first of which being California in 1985 and most recently Arkansas, which passed a requirement last year. Additionally, the concept of Holocaust education remains strongly supported by the public, with 93% of Americans supporting the idea that the Holocaust should be taught to every school student. Before I wrap up, just a quick note about the amendment. Amendment 1995 is a technical amendment that takes the original text of the bill but inserts it in a statute that concerns social studies education. This amendment was brought to us by the schools after the bill cleared committee. The thinking behind this is that it better aligns with the intent of the bill and ensures that it will be taught to students in the correct grade. So this just places the identical text in a statute that makes more sense for the topic area. We ran this language by Senator Walz and notified Speaker Hilgers before the priority designation was given, just to make sure everyone knew about this technical change. In our hearing, among the organizations that testified were Congressman Bacon's office, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Institute for Holocaust Education. Part of the reason there is an urgency and bipartisanship towards this moment is that we are at a crossroads. Those who lived this unimaginable tragedy are leaving us. It's up to us to make sure the Holocaust does not become another event that begins a slow fade into history, and that the lessons of unchecked hate are not dulled until they are completely forgotten. I do have a handout that should have been distributed to each of your desks with details on the front about the necessity of this bill, and on the back you will find the committee statement which details strong bipartisan support, including it being advanced unanimously from the Education Committee. With that, I would encourage your green vote on the bill and the underlying amendment.
Thank you, Senator Day. Mr. Clerk, for amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Day would offer AM 1995.
Senator Day, you're recognized to open on AM 1995.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just repeat what I just mentioned a second ago. Amendment 1995 is a technical amendment that takes the original text of the bill but inserts it into a statute that concerns social studies education. The concern with the original language was that it would have essentially forced schools to teach the Holocaust in every grade from K through 12. And we wanted to make sure that the language reflected something that would be more age appropriate. So it's just a technical change to make sure that we're teaching it at the appropriate time for kids. So again, I would encourage your green vote on Amendment 1995 and the underlying bill.
Thank you, Senator Day. Debate is now open on AM 1995. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 1995 and LB 888. And I think it's important we all understand that if we forget the history of the Holocaust and the Jewish people around our world, and if we don't stay connected to the love and the empathy and the compassion that it takes to understand that kind of devastation, then the refrain of never again that we say about the Holocaust is not going to be a reality for future generations. And I'm really grateful to be a part of a generation, one of the last generations, where I can learn firsthand about the atrocities of the Holocaust from survivors of the Holocaust, from people who were really there. I had the deep, deep honor a couple of years ago of speaking at the Holocaust Memorial Day event here at the Capitol in the Rotunda. And I got to meet several Holocaust survivors at that event that we have here in Nebraska. And I've had the opportunity throughout my life at different times to meet other survivors of that genocide. I was a German major in college, and I spent a lot of time living and working in Berlin. And so I also have a connection to that country and the deep shame that the people of that country feel. There's a word for it, it's Kulturschande, and it means the collective shame that they feel as a country about the atrocities of World War II. There is nothing like that in our culture, is there? There's no word in English to describe the atrocities that Americans have perpetrated on people here on our own soil and people abroad in other countries. And it is amazing to meet people who went through the Holocaust. It's amazing to know people who, for whom the atrocities that we talk about as a thing of the past were a thing of reality. But it's important for us to understand that for so many people in this world, that reality still exists today. We have a violent past behind us. We are living in a violent present. And unless we take action, it's likely we will live in a violent future as well. The rise of white nationalism and white supremacy in our country here is a reminder of how far we must be willing to go in the struggle against fascism, in the struggle against racism, in the struggle against inequality that led to cultural attitudes that paved the way for the Holocaust to happen. And there are people living today for whom life under fascism was a reality and is a reality today. And many of these people are refugees, are immigrants, are people who face persecution for who they are. And they're also Americans who suffer from the fascism of neo-Nazism and white supremacy, who are followed out of mosques by people carrying guns, who fear going to temple and synagogue because of the threat of white supremacy and gun violence. And all of these things are important to think about in the context of recognizing atrocities against the Jewish people and the importance of bills like LB 888. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I'm in support of 888, but I have a few questions that I was wondering if Senator Day would respond.
Senator Day, would you yield?
Of course.
Senator Day, you mentioned in your opening that Senator Sarah Howard had brought this bill earlier.
Yes.
Is that correct? Do you know what happened to that bill?
I believe it stalled in committee.
Okay.
There was some language, I think, that some opponents did not like, and we've taken that language out of the bill.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Your bill says teaching the Holocaust and other genocides. Is there a description of what other genocides are?
No, and that was some of the language that we omitted this time. I think the last time this bill was brought, several different genocides were detailed within the language. And I believe that there was some opposing political discussion over specific genocides. And so we have removed that language.
So it's just a general statement, genocides in general?
Correct.
Okay. So can you give me an example what other genocides may be?
The genocide in Rwanda would be another example of genocide.
Okay. Is there in statute anywhere a definition of genocide?
I'm not sure, Senator Erdman, but I'd be happy to get that information for you.
If there isn't, it would be, I think it'd be a good idea to have a definition.
Sure.
So it's just not open-ended that somebody can say this is a genocide when it really isn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think if we had a definition of what genocide means, I'd be a lot more comfortable with the bill.
Okay. Yes, I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman and Senator Day. Senator Morfeld, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of the bill, and in response to the definition of genocide, I went back and got the Black's Law Dictionary. And so if I find it while I'm on the mic here, I'll pull it up. I mean, we'll go to the general meaning of the word, the common meaning of the word. We generally go to either Webster's Dictionary or Black's Law Dictionary if there isn't a definition in statute. So I'll provide that in just a second. I just wanted to rise in support of the bill. You know, many of you may know my wife is Jewish. Her father actually was born in Slovakia, then the Czechoslovakia. The two countries have since split. He actually immigrated from Czechoslovakia at the time to Israel to escape persecution as a Jewish person, his entire family. I believe he had 9 brothers and sisters. So they all immigrated to Israel to escape persecution as Jewish people. And he served in the IDF for many years and then immigrated to the United States and met my wife's mother, and the rest is history. And so I hear a lot of stories from him about the trials and tribulations of being persecuted as a Jewish person and having to flee his home country in order to have freedom and safety and respect. And so I think this bill is important because it reemphasizes the need to avoid something that should never have happened in the first place and hopefully never happens again. And I think all too often, we as a people, whether you're a millennial like myself, or somebody who's older, or somebody who's even younger than me, oftentimes it's easy to forget that these things have happened, and it wasn't that long ago. I think I heard it was just 70 years ago. That is not that long ago. And I think all too often we think we are immune and that we've moved on and advanced as a society from these types of atrocities, when in fact we have Europe's second largest nation with its second largest military under siege right now. And that should be a reminder to all of us that, one, these types of things can happen again, and we'll find out the extent to if any war crimes were committed in the Ukraine. Certainly not trying to say it's the same thing as the Holocaust at all, but it's a reminder that these things can happen again and that peaceful nations and peaceful people can be attacked. And so educating people about the Holocaust, I hope, will prevent those types of things from happening again and prevent people like my father-in-law from having to flee their own country and their own homeland to have security, prosperity, and safety. Now, in terms of the definition of genocide, if you just give me a moment, here we go. Black's Law Dictionary definition of genocide: an international crime involving acts causing serious physical and mental harm to the extent to destroy partially or entirely national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. It also goes on to say the widely ratified Genocide Convention of 1948 defines the crime. The International Criminal Court has jurisdiction to try those accused of genocide. So essentially, colleagues, if you look at the core definition, it is an international crime involving acts causing serious physical and mental harm with the intent to destroy partially or entirely a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group.
1 minute.
So that is the common definition under the Black's Law Dictionary. I'm sure there's also a definition under the Webster's Dictionary, but that's what a court would go and look to in terms of not having a definition in statute if it does not exist. I urge your support of AM 1995 and LB 888. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I support the bill. I recall this came in 2020, and if you'll recall, it actually came out of committee. It was a huge omnibus bill that ended up dying on the floor. But one of the issues, or one of the things that Senator Chambers brought up, and he actually got an amendment that was adopted 34-3 with 11 present not voting, was FA 104. And what FA 104 did was said Holocaust, he put a comma, and then he strike the word and after genocide, he said add slavery, lynching, and other racial massacres in America. Part of the issue that I have with the overall concept is not necessarily listing the Holocaust, but not listing slavery. When from 1501 to 1866, the Middle Passage brought, or 12.7 allegedly, there's numbers different from 12.7 to 18.3 million Africans were put on ships, of which only 10.3 arrived here in America. So a little bit over of 2.5 million lost their lives as they were put into a slave trade and moved from Africa to the Americas. And to list only one thing that necessarily didn't happen in America, but not list something that really was the original sin of America, I think I know is my issue. I'm not going to spend time fighting this on the floor today. One, I think we can come to an agreement, but I do want to at least tell everybody why I will be present not voting on this, is I think we have to figure out an amendment on select to encompass what I would say one of the greatest tragedies in America, which was the slave trade. And so it isn't a vote against the Holocaust, it is the vote against not mentioning slavery. And if you recall, when this provision back in 2020 was debated, there was a lot of debate. But I can tell you that the amendment that was, and it was LB 1131, the amendment that was actually dropped by Senator Chambers had bipartisan support, 34 votes. There wasn't a call of the House. That's why there wasn't some people present not voting. But the point of it is we have to talk about all of history. There's also a simple solution. There's a bill sitting on general file that recognizes Juneteenth as a holiday. I'm willing to let this go from an education standpoint if this body would pass Juneteenth as a holiday, because the holiday embraces slavery and recognizing the end of slavery. And since it's already a federal holiday, it won't cost this body anything. So it should be on consent calendar. It should pass pretty easily since it's already a federal holiday. But I think we have to balance to make sure that we're not forgetting about one of our greatest sins that still has the effect of not only economics, property, housing, and racial disparities. I think we have to make sure we tie that together. So I have talked to Senator Day. I think we'll have a conversation and try to come to an agreement. I think the easiest way is to put on consent calendar Juneteenth, and I don't have to worry about schools teaching it because our communities will teach it on a holiday and understand the importance of that holiday. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Pansing Brooks, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad to rise at this moment right after Senator Wayne because I felt that I meant to say this yesterday. Yet February was Black History Month, and we truly neglected to talk about some of the important matters regarding Black history. And in that regard, I want to give you a few facts that I think are important because this month is Women's History Month. So I will be giving facts on that as well. And I also have some facts that I want to announce about the Holocaust and the importance of Senator Day's bill for Jewish people. So to start with, last month as Black History Month is important. Some facts I learned from the Equal Justice Initiative is that because Black people are underrepresented in prosecutors' offices, where 95% of elected prosecutors are white, and in the judiciary, where similar disparities exist, jury service is often the only opportunity for a community perspective to impact the outcome of a case in America's legal system. In 1708, there was a slave revolt in Newton, Long Island, New York, resulting in 11 deaths. In 1773, this is all in February, Rhode Island General Assembly authorizes enlistment of slaves. 1859 in February, Arkansas legislature requires free Blacks to choose exile or slavery. 1879, Exodus of 1879, Southern Blacks flee political and economic exploitation. 1942 in February, race riot at Sojourner Truth Homes, a housing project in Detroit, Michigan. In 1965 in February, there were a number of different things that happened. Jimmy Lee Jackson, a 26-year-old Black man, is shot by a white officer after police attack a peaceful civil rights protest in Marion, Alabama. He dies 8 days later. February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X is assassinated in front of his wife and young daughters while giving a speech at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York. 1967, Wilt Chamberlain sinks his 35th consecutive field goal to set an NBA record. 1976, Natalie Cole's the first Black American to win Best New Artist at the 18th Grammy Awards. 1981 in February, Calvin Murphy sets the NBA record with 78 consecutive free throws. 1984, Michael Jackson wins 8 awards at the 26 Grammys. 2001, at the 15th Soul Train Music Awards, the Destiny's Child and Jay-Z all come home as winners, and the Isley Brothers. 2005, at the 19th Soul Train Music Awards, Ice Cube, Usher, and Ciara win. 2021, Chadwick Boseman posthumously wins the Best Actor for Film at the 78th Golden Globes. The point is, we missed celebrating and honoring people of color during the month of February, during Black History Month. And the history has not been perfect at all, as many of those dates indicated, but there's been some joy as well. So I just wanted to stand up momentarily. I support Senator Day's bill. I would be amenable to an amendment by Senator Wayne if he so chooses. And I appreciate Senator Day bringing this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pansing Brooks. Senator Flood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, members. I appreciate what Senator Day is doing here. I'm generally very careful with any kind of mandate that we put on K-12 schools. Not to say that I haven't voted for them when appropriate, but I think what Senator Day has done here has an extreme amount of merit. If you just look at the, obviously, you look at the Holocaust in the context of the last 500 years, and you think about all of the atrocities that have been committed, the one that is the freshest, the one that generations that we have lived with that talk about what happened when American soldiers and Russian soldiers at that time liberated these concentration camps in Germany, what that meant and what they saw, what the victims of the Holocaust endured, American Jews that lived to tell the story and for generations will tell it forever and ever. What I want to point out today is that the reason this matters is that what happened during the Holocaust has been used and maligned, and the role of Nazi Germany has been part of our dialogue as a country and as a world. How many times do we hear it either on the right or the left? The Nazis are taking over, the neo-Nazis. And just in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, forefront on the mind of almost every American is this claim that Vladimir Putin says we need to denazify Ukraine. He is invoking this idea that is absurd, that has no merit, that Vladimir Putin has this right to go into Ukraine, telling the Russian people that he has to rid them of the neo-Nazis. The problem is that with the Holocaust, truth has to prevail. The Russian people are being told one thing, but yet we know it's absurd. In our Western culture, we know it's absurd. We watch everything unfold on television, but there are people in Russia that think that what Vladimir Putin is doing in the name of denazifying Ukraine is absolutely justified. And we know it's not. What Senator Day is doing here is she is making sure that the truth remains, that we seek the truth, that we focus on the atrocities of the Holocaust. And this is unlike a lot of other events in history. It's one that people use depending on what they're trying to accomplish for their own goals. Vladimir Putin didn't need to invade Ukraine for any other reason than his own fascist cult that is working to restore this idea of the Soviet Union's greatness. And Senator Day, by making sure that Nebraska students learn about the Holocaust, they learn the truth about the Holocaust, they learn the truth about the Nazis, will ensure that future generations in our state understand what happened and what should never, ever, ever be repeated, and why America fights for good and for freedom. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator Bosselman, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Senator Flood, for your words. I appreciate that. I think that's very important that the context of this stays where that is at, focuses on those areas. If you haven't been through the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., you need to go. You need to visit. You need to see what happened. You need to see the things that those people, all those people, millions of people were put through. What happened to them? I had a great uncle that was a pastor. He was one of the first ones to go into the concentration camps. I've seen the pictures they've taken. I've seen the things that they've dealt with. I've talked with family who have been there, who were in those concentration camps. And I appreciate Senator Day's bill on those measures. I think that is extremely important for us to focus on as far as our teaching and that truth needs to come out. But I do have some questions, and I'll ask Senator Erdman if he'd answer a couple questions.
Senator Erdman, would you yield?
Yes, I will.
Senator Erdman, you spoke before about defining genocide. I have a question on the bill specifically as to what all potentially could be included in the term genocide, because we all may have a different definition. Black's Law Dictionary may say it, but we may interpret it different ways. Could you expand upon what your thoughts are on that?
Well, Senator Bossman, as you heard, Senator Wayne made some comments about that, and Senator Pansing Brooks, and so I think it should be defined in such a way that we know what is all going to be included, and I think Senator Wayne would agree that to get his full support, we have to make sure that we've defined other things as well. And I don't know that the definition that Senator Moorfield read is what we need to do. Maybe it is, but we need to define it in a way that the schools understand exactly what they're going to teach or what they're required to teach, and then we move forward from there. And so it's pretty vague the way it's written, and I think it needs to be tightened up, and a definition needs to be given so that they have an understanding of what should be taught and what is outside the bounds or what is included.
Thanks, Senator Erdman. I mean, I don't disagree or have any opposing statements what Senator Wayne or Senator Pansy Brooks said. I think we need to specifically state what those are. In other words, if it's a Holocaust or something else, we say these are the genocide areas, things that happen that we identify that we want taught, not saying genocide and then you teacher, you administrator, you whomever, figure out what you want to teach. I think we need to, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you, is we should state in the bill exactly what it is that we want to be addressed.
We're on the same page here, I believe.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Erdman. I will sit and continue to watch this bill as it goes through. I think Senator Day has got a great start on the bill, but I think there needs to be more work on it. I think that can probably happen between general and select, and I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Bosselman and Senator Erdman. Senator Day, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the discussion on this bill and some of the things that have been highlighted in terms of defining genocide in statute. We'd be happy to discuss an amendment to do so if that's necessary. But I will also add, as I mentioned previously in my discussions with Senator Erdman, that the original bill that was introduced in 2020 had a specific list of genocides that could be taught, and that caused several issues with different groups in terms of, they don't believe there was a genocide. These people do, these people don't. And so we wanted to alleviate that issue. But I am willing to consider an amendment to do so if we feel like that's necessary. And also, we're discussing why the Holocaust and why not other things. Again, it does include other genocides, but we're specifically highlighting the Holocaust. I think as Senator Flood had mentioned in terms of recent events and recent discussions, recent incidents of students appropriating and abusing Holocaust imagery have served as a reminder and a wake-up call for the need to teach the universal lessons of the Holocaust to help ensure that the next generation is getting the fullest understanding possible of the implications of the Nazi genocide of 6 million Jews and millions of others in Europe. I don't disagree with Senator Wayne. If he would like to bring an amendment on select to include some of the other topics that he mentioned, he is welcome to do so. And again, I would encourage your green light on Amendment 1995 in the underlying bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator Pansy Brooks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sorry. I want to stand up first to, number one, say that I agree with Senator Flood. He said it very eloquently that we have to worry about the Nazis and what Russia is doing. I appreciate his words. I wanted to also say that I think it's a good idea to think about how to best go forward, Senator Day, because I don't want this to expand to a point where it goes out of bounds and people might bring it next year too. So I'm happy to help with that however you want. My greatest concern is that I have had a number of people of Jewish faith reaching out to me fearful about what is happening in this country. There was a study put out by the American Enterprise Institute in 2019 showing that, and Brandeis University was involved, showing that based on FBI data in 2019, Jewish people are 2.6 times more likely than blacks and 2.2 times more likely than Muslims to be victims of hate crimes. Think of that. No one should be subject to the hate crimes. We shouldn't have anybody, whether people of color, whether people of different faith, but if we don't learn about the past history and the hideous treatment and the annihilation of a people in Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, we are doomed to repeat history. And I just want to congratulate Senator Day for this bill. I have so many people and friends reaching out in gratitude for your effort and your work, Senator Day. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Pansing Brooks. Senator Flood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief here as I conclude my remarks on this from Senator Day, who I think has brought forward something that's very timely and appropriate. And I want to thank her, her staff, and all of the supporters that I know come from Sarpy County in support of this. I think it's also important to recognize that by voting for this, we are acknowledging and teaching our students about what happened during the Holocaust, the 6 million lives that were taken at the hands of Adolf Hitler, but we're also recognizing that from that came the state of Israel. Something that we have to acknowledge is one of our most important allies in the United States, whose security matters to us, a people who have long been allies with our country. And if you're voting for this, you recognize that Israel is at the top of the list when it comes to one of the friends we can count on. And so I want to express my support. I want to recognize where you're going with this, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Flood, I have to slightly disagree. Not voting for this is not that we're not trying to teach it. It's just that we're leaving things out. When we get into creating lists of what needs to be taught, I think there's a significant difference between financial literacy, which is right above the amendment, versus specific historical things. And I think we have to be careful when we start listing out things, because we are oftentimes leaving out other important things. That's the general problem with list. And so based on the Black law definition of genocide, many of African-American history, such as the massacre of Black Wall Street, would not qualify as genocide and therefore not be taught. I have a fundamental problem with that because it's not international according to the Black Law Dictionary. That is what I am trying to say. There are genocides that are going on right now in Africa that would qualify over our own American history and some of the darkest moments in our American history. So again, I have an amendment. I gave it to Senator Day. We'll see how it goes. I'm not going to hijack this at this moment. Unlike in 2020, where it was a massive committee omnibus bill, where there was a lot of conversation for hours, we could sit down and work with the introducer at that time. It was Senator Howard and Senator Chambers to come up with extra dollars. our extra language. I'm not going to do that today and keep this from moving forward, but it will be a problem on select because I can't leave out our culture and our history. And I'll just give you one example of the difference, right? Holocaust survivors, many of them got reparations. Slavery, descendants of slaves never did. That's a big factor that needs to be talked about if you're going to talk about Holocaust and slavery. Notice I didn't say verses because it's not a verses. They should all be taught. But when we start creating lists, you are often forgetting things. And I'm just speaking from an African-American standpoint. There are probably thousands of untold stories that should be taught on the massacres that occurred in Native American history. That's not being listed. So are they less important? Does those massacres consider to be less important because they're not put in statute? I think that's what we say when we vote yes on this, is that this is more important than other people's histories and massacres and genocide that occur by not listing them. If you want to put it in race perspective, that you would teach about African Americans and all other races. I'm pretty sure some of you would feel offended by that you're not being listed. That's the same concept. So again, I think this is the right start. It's the same start we had in 2020. We ended on a different point, and I hope we end on a different point when it comes to this. But I don't think a no vote or a present not voting vote on this particular day means that you're against teaching of the Holocaust. I think you're against leaving other things out that are just as important to different Americans. So that's where I'm at today. We'll see where select is when we get there. But this is the problem with lists in general. When you create a list, you leave something out. And when you leave something out in the statute, it means it's not as important. And if you put a catch-all provision, you leave it up to the discretion of whether or not they will consider something a genocide or consider teaching it. I just have a fundamental problem with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Day, you recognize to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate what Senator Wayne is articulating today. I agree with him in terms of we cannot gloss over certain parts of what should be included in our multicultural education statute. And again, he had brought to me what the amendment that Senator Chambers had brought a few years ago. And so again, I would just encourage discussion between now and general and on select file so we can help alleviate some of these issues. If senators would like to bring amendments to the bill to include other things, they are welcome to do that, and we will discuss that between now and then. I would appreciate a green vote on Amendment 1995 and the underlying bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Day. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 1995. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
44 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment.
The amendment is adopted. Turning to debate on LB 888. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Day, you recognize to close. Senator Day waives closing. The question before the body is the advancement of LB 888D. And our initial, all those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
44 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill.
LB 888 is advanced. Colleagues, we're going to turn back to LB 436, which we had temporarily passed over. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 436, introduced by Senator Ben Hansen, is a bill for enacting the Athletic Training Practice Act. provides changes and eliminates definitions, changes provisions relating to licensure and scope of practice, harmonized provisions, repeals the original sections, and outright repeals several sections. Bill was read for the first time on January 15th of this year and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are no committee amendments. There are additional amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Ben Hansen, you are recognized to open on LB 436.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. LB 436 is a bill intended to modernize the Athletic Training Practice Act in Nebraska. The Nebraska State Athletic Trainers Association is the only membership organization for athletic trainers in Nebraska and has been working for the last 3 years to update an act that is 23 years old. The current language, which is dated back to 1999, no longer reflects the skills and abilities athletic trainers have through expanded and continued education. The education standards for athletic trainers has gone through 4 revisions since 1999. They now have clinical and didactic coursework. This prepares them to work with a wide range of populations from pediatric to geriatric, and with those who present with comorbidities. The NSATA satisfied the 407 process, getting the support of the Technical Review Committee, the full Board of Health, and the Director of the Division of Public Health, Dr. Gary Antone. Throughout the process, recommendations were considered and added into the bill. To create LB 436, at least 24 different organizations were contacted. Their input was heard and changes were made to finish with a bill that is clear, concise, and one which ensures public safety through responsibility and disciplinary process that are comprised of standards equal to every regulated healthcare profession in Nebraska. With this in mind, LB 436 will expand the purview of what athletic trainers are allowed to do in the state of Nebraska in a number of ways. Currently in Nebraska, we are drastically undervaluing and underutilizing a vital group of trained medical professionals in our healthcare community. LB 436 will provide avenues for athletic trainers to help patients beyond only those individuals defined as athletes by broadening their scope of practice in a manner that is consistent with their training and qualifications. LB 436 would additionally give athletic trainers the ability to have emergency medication available should the need arise in an emergency situation. No athletic trainer should be forced to choose between their license and a life. And the NSATA has worked closely with the Nebraska Medical Association and the Nebraska Pharmacy Association in developing the language within the bill. It would also provide that athletic trainers can continue to use modalities and treatments that are currently used, as well as adding mechanical modalities, including dry needling. And with that, Mr. Speaker, if I can continue on to the Amendment 499.
1 second, Senator Hansen. I'm going to do this announcement briefly. Senator Geist would like to recognize and welcome 25 elementary and middle school students and their teachers from Villa Marie School of Special Needs students. They are seated in the north balcony. Please rise and be recognized by your Nebraska Legislature. Mr. Clerk, for an amendment.
Mr. President, Senator Ben Hansen would move to amend with AM 499.
Senator Hansen, you recognize to open on AM 499.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attached is AM 499, which was requested by DHHS in regard to the topic of dry needling. The intent of LB 436 is to provide that athletic trainers have the statutory authority to practice dry needling by providing that the board adopt rules and regulations regarding the use of dry needling by athletic trainers. Although, in an opinion by the Attorney General, the term physical modalities included dry needling as a physical modality used by a practitioner, DHHS recommends that the term dry needling be added to the modality language. On page 3, line 22 and 27, the amendment changes the term board to department. The bill calls for the adoption of rules and regulations by the board. DHHS recommended that the adoption of rules and regulations should be made by the Department of Health and Human Services because professional boards are advisory boards to the department. On page 4, line 11, removes the term medical from before the term documentation so as not to confuse the term medical documentation with the practice of medicine. This amendment also clarifies the existing language that a person must obtain a license to become an athletic trainer to perform the functions outlined in 38-408. And finally, page 6, line 4, clarifies that a student is exempt from licensing requirements if the athletic training education program is accredited by the accrediting body approved by the board rather than being in good standing. In conclusion, colleagues, LB 436 with AM 499 allows our athletic trainers to work in a manner that is consistent with their education and training. In doing this, we are providing direct service to the people of Nebraska who can truly benefit from their shared knowledge and training. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Senator Hansen. Debate is now open on AM 499. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Hansen, you recognize the close. Senator Hansen waives closing. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 499. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
43 ayes, no nays on adoption of the amendment.
AM 499 is adopted. Returning to debate on the bill. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Hansen, you recognize the close. Senator Hansen waives closing. Question before the body is the advancement of LB 436 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all those voted who wish to? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
43 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on advancement of the bill.
LB 436 is advanced. Senator Wishart, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I've not done one of these in the 6 years that I've been serving here. Colleagues, you are going to see a resume and biography being handed out to you. As you are aware, the Executive Board appointed a 3-member special personnel panel consisting of myself, Senator Breezy, and Senator Arch to investigate a workplace harassment complaint. The special personnel panel interviewed and hired an outside independent investigator to assist with the investigation. The outside independent investigator is an attorney specializing in internal workplace investigations of this nature. Her name is Tara Paulson, and she is a partner at the Rembolt Luckey law firm. Ms. Paulson will conduct this investigation and make findings after the investigation, which will be shared with the special personnel panel and all of you. Please understand that pursuant to the legislature's workplace harassment policy, while the investigation is being conducted, it will be done on a confidential basis, and the special personnel panel will not be reporting updates. The special personnel panel fully expects the investigation to conclude prior to the end of session. As you likely know, the legislature has a strong policy against retaliation with respect to employees who lodge good faith complaints, as well as those who participate in investigations such as this. It is my expectation that if asked to participate in Ms. Paulson's investigation, everyone who is asked will participate and cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Revenue, chaired by Senator Linehan, reports Legislative Bill 596, 729, 730, and 1080 to general file, all having committee amendments. Senator Linehan introduces Legislative Bill 939A, Bill for Enacting New Appropriations, appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of provisions of Legislative Bill 939. Senator Hilkeman, Legislative Resolution 312, that'll be laid over. Name add, Senator Jacobson Senator Jacobson and Mosier to LB 773, Senator Matt Hansen to 815, Walls 902, McCollister 920, Brewer 1099, McCollister 1183. The Urban Affairs Committee will hold an executive session upon adjournment under the north balcony. Urban Affairs upon adjournment under the north balcony. Transportation Committee will hold an executive session today at 1:30 in room 1113. Transportation 1:30, 1113. Revenue Committee will meet today upon adjournment under the south balcony. Revenue upon adjournment, south balcony. Government Committee will hold an executive session today at 1:30 in room 1003. Government Committee today, 1:30, 10:03. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Senator Flood would move to adjourn the body until Wednesday, March 2nd at 9:00 a.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. We are adjourned.